folks, I'm Vasel here.
Jason Levine.
And today we're taking a look at a new game, except that it's not new. This is called Elfenroads. This is a huge box, comparatively, because the original game, which came out many years ago, looks like this. This was from a small company called Whitewind, which was started and run by Alan Moon, who had a few hits, and then one day he made Ticket to Ride, and now he's one of the most famous designers out there.
Yes.
But this was back before that happened, although Elfenroads did win the Spiel des Jahres.
Yes.
It never became a huge hit, though, but it certainly was
that's because
popular for a while.
I'm looking here, and I have limited number 976, and I think he printed 1,000, or maybe
yeah, but this was
1,500.
reprinted then by Rio Grande, Elfenroads.
Only recently.
No. There was another version of this. I had it.
Elfenland, not Elfenroads.
Elfenland, you're right. Which was essentially the same game.
Elfenland is the one that won Spiel des Jahres also.
I apologize. I'm mixing them up.
But Elfenroads is, for years, like this box here was considered a Grail game, and people were paying $200, $300, $400 for this version, and now it's back in print.
Right, but Elfenland was almost the same thing. They changed some minor things. And
yes.
In fact, this Elfenroads is closer to Elfenland than it is to Elfenroads.
Yes.
Except they came out with an expansion for Elfenlands called Elfen Gold, which also became hard to find.
Yes.
Back then, lots of games became hard to find. However, that expansion is included in here, as well as a new version of the game called Elfen Sea. Lots of stuff in here. Let's take a look. The goal of Elfenland is to take your elf, who is this giant boot, and to move them from city to city. There are different cities on the board, and to show that you visited a city, in each city there's a cube of your color. This is if you're playing a full 6-player game. On each city, when you visit a city, you'll take a cube off of that color. And at the end of the game, whoever has the most cubes is the winner. You can also play with a variant where you have a home city. This is like a secret home city, that card that you would get that matches one of the cities on the board. And at the end of the game, for example, this is Biata, or whatever the city is called, which is right over here. I need to be in that city, or I will lose a point for each space that I'm away from that city. So that's one of the variants that you can play. Each player is going to start with an obstacle tile. And as the game goes by, each round of the game, you're going to be drawing more tiles. And there's going to be face-up tiles up here. You can see some different types of tiles that are in the game. And there's face-down tiles. These cards that you can see right here, just keep track of how many rounds the game has. Once players have drawn tiles, what players are going to do is they're going to take turns placing these tiles down on different spaces. Each route between two cities can have a tile placed on it, with the exception of obstacle tiles, which can be placed there to make something more difficult. Now, all of this operates on this card here. What this means is it shows the different types of transportation that are in the game. Now, for example, the dragon, which I showed you, can go on the grassy area, can go in the forest, can go in the desert, can go in the mountains. It cannot travel on the river. So it has the different places. But if I'm using the cloud, for example, the cloud does not go in the desert. The number there, 1 or 2, is how many cards it would take to cross that. So players are going to take turns placing these in different areas around the board. And once they're done placing them in the different areas around the board, then players in turn order are going to move. The players are going to have a handful of cards, and these cards are going to show the different types of transportation. So this one, for example, shows a desert, shows 1. So I could play 1 card to move my boot from here to here across the desert using the dragon. The obstacle makes me use an extra card. And while you can use any 3 cards to travel somewhere, you're going to want to try to use the different cards that are possible. Although you'll need to use 2 dragons, for example, to cross a forest, but 1 to cross everything else. So you're going to basically be looking at the cards that you have at the beginning of each round and try to get the tokens that you need to get. Set those up on a board. Other people will be putting tokens on the board too. And then you can move as far as you possibly can, taking a cue ball for each city that you go to, as long as you have the right cards in your hand. When the round is over and everyone has moved, you'll discard, you'll draw back up some cards, you'll get some new tiles, and you'll keep playing and going that way. Elfin Gold adds gold to the mix. You can see there's coins there, and at the beginning of the game, each city has a bonus token placed in there, and when you get to those cities, you will get that much gold. And instead of drawing tiles, you have a whole pile, a whole lineup of tiles, and there's even more different types of tiles. Some will let you switch transportation tokens. Some will give you gold. They'll double the gold bonus you get from going to a city, and you'll bid for each of these tiles each turn. And then once you've gotten those tiles, then the rest of the game is very similar, where you will place them out and play cards. The other main difference between Elfenland and the regular game is instead of just drawing cards, you will be drawing them from a face-up display, where you can draw a card face up, and there will be money cards added to the deck. And when you draw one of those, you'll simply get more money as time goes by. Although you can if you don't draw, it gets put to the side, and eventually there'll be a lot of money cards which you might want to take just because, well, they're worth a lot of money. So that is Elfenland. Elfin Gold adds that bidding phase to it, which really does lengthen the game up. But you're just going to be moving across here. You'll notice there's some rivers and some crossing the water. You can use different cards, boat cards, to do those, and they don't need a token there. Other than that, though, you're going to want tokens in it. When you go down a river, there's an arrow. It only costs 1 boat card to do that. To go up, costs 2. On the other side of the board is the Elfin Sea. The main difference on this one here is that there are more cities, and there's a lot of ocean tiles. You're going to be adding some more cards to the game, some whale cards that allow you to move across the water. And like I said, there's more cities. And when you go to a city for the first time, when you pull your cube off of it, you'll draw some of these bonus tiles. These can be used as travel tiles as you're going across Elfin Sea, but they also, at the end of the game, will give you bonus points for the different amounts that you collect of the different types. Otherwise, you play pretty much the exact same way that you play Elfenland. Hey! Okay, so we have Elfenroads here. Now, in here are 3 different products. We have Elfenlands, I think. Is it even called Elfenlands in the game itself? Yeah, no, Elfenland.
Elfenland, yes.
Elfenland. And then you have the Elfin Gold, which is the expansion, which is actually as many rules as the base game, and then Elfin Sea. And the way they set this rule book is, if you want to play Elfin Sea, you can just go and play that. Elfin Sea is the most basic of all the games, collecting the different tokens. It's the shortest of the games. If I was introducing this game to new people, Elfin Sea is definitely the way to go.
Yes.
Okay? There's not a huge difference between Elfin Sea and Elfenland, except it doesn't have the tokens, and it's not so stringent, like you can only keep 1 counter. Elfin Gold changes the whole game and adds a auction thing to it. So let's talk about Elfin Gold in a minute. Let's talk about Elfenland itself, because that's the game most people are probably going to play. And in
yes.
this, we're mentioning Elfin Sea too. It's, they're similar enough to talk about. Elfenland, first of all, if you played the Rio Grande version,
you had those giant boots.
No, not the giant boots. The giant boots are still there. No, you had those big cylinders for each city.
Oh, yes, the cylinders.
That would fall over and roll all over the board. It was a real pain in the neck. I'm glad they changed it to cubes. Although sometimes you'll miss where your cubes are on the board. You have to keep an eye out for that. The board is beautiful, but the board is busy. So it's easy to miss maybe when there's a tile on the board or something. But I do like how the board looks. This is kind of it's a really interesting transportation game, because you're just trying to move around the board, but you can deliberately mess up other people by putting a transportation tile down in a spot where you don't even need to go there, but you just put one down hoping that they don't have that card, because you're watching what they take. I mean, I am watching what other people take. I don't know about you.
I watch what other people take too.
Right, so you can mess people over. You also have the obstacles to mess people over even more.
Yes.
And then you're trying to be efficient for yourself. And sometimes you can accidentally help another player out a lot by putting the right tile down. And I'm like, oh, perfect. What do you think about that part?
Well, I like it. Now, it's interesting because I was talking before about how this was a Grail game. And I think the reason this was reprinted now is because it was a Grail game for so long and people wanted it. And they decided to make it more public available. The interesting thing that I think is that everything kind of feels outdated to me. I think that he made Ticket to Ride after this, and the mechanics in Ticket to Ride are better than this. And it's a very similar mechanic. Here, you're collecting sets of cards, which are how you can travel. And you're doing that via the same Ticket to Ride kind of mechanic where you're picking up the cards. You're then laying down tiles to determine where you could travel over, which is similar to I'm going to play the cards down and make little chains of trains, and then you're scoring based on where you connect to. And I really feel like this is an older, out-of-date version of Ticket to Ride, and it has that Grail factor, which is why it came out, but I don't think it stands up as well as Ticket to Ride.
Yeah, I have to agree on that. And this game is not as simple to teach people, right? I come in and say, okay, we're going to take these transportation tiles, and then we're going to put them down, and then you have to move over those. You can put each transportation tile down only in certain sections, and then when you have those sections, sometimes you have to pay 1 card, sometimes you have to pay 2 cards, but you can always play 3 cards. But you can only play 3 cards if there's a tile between those. If there's no tile, you can't move at all.
Yes.
Now, I know that as soon as I say that, someone's going to write there, this is not that complicated of a game, blah, blah, blah. You're right, it isn't. But it's one of those games that just doesn't necessarily... It's not so easy to grok for a lot of people. Yeah. I've taught this game to a lot of people, and I've always had to say, no, you can't do that. No, I say that a lot over the course of the game.
Yes.
I do like that Elfen Sea is simpler, I thought.
Yes.
And drawing the tiles helps because you're like, oh, you have the tiles, and because you're drawing those extra tiles, you can place them all over the board, and you easily can move it's a lot easier to get to the places you want to go to.
Yes, I think that's true. I think that rather than the money system, I don't like the money system.
Yeah, well, let's talk about there's 2 things. First of all, there's a minor variant / expansion included with Elfenland where you have your home city, and you are trying to get back to the home city. That I will never not play with. I think it gives you some sort of focus.
Yes,
Get back to that city in time, and it makes the game more than just who gets the right cards. It's like, oh, I want to go out here and get these, but I need to make sure I'm back in time.
Exactly, which again goes back to Ticket to Ride, where you have the routes that you're trying to complete.
Right.
And I can see how he developed this into other games, which is why, like I say, he took this game, he developed it into other games later. And
yeah, I think you can even see Union Pacific.
Union Pacific as well with
the airlines game.
Yes. But in this one, the thing I don't like, there's 2 things I don't like. I don't like the auctioning for the tiles because you could, if you're collecting money and you don't make it somewhere, then you don't have a lot of money and you're basically out of the auction and you're not going to get the tiles you need to ever do anything. So it's a much harsher game than some of his later games because of that. And because of the tiles, I could put a tile down and then, I'm going to put a double, and now you don't have the second card to make it through, and now you're just completely out of it.
Yes, I like Elfenland, but I do not like Elfen Gold. I think it adds, first of all, it makes the game longer, because you have this auction. All right, now we get our tiles. It's a lot easier just to pick the tiles and play them. The auction thing just really kind of drags stuff out, I think. But at the same time, not just the auction, but like Jason says, the game already has a little bit of the rich get richer, or if I'm doing well, I can keep doing well. But in the auction thing, it's even worse because you can do that. And then if players know what they're doing, they might be like, oh, I got extra money, I'm going to buy that tile. And they don't even need that tile, and they're like, oh, that was the one tile I needed. This game was good in its time. There is no disrespect for me to Elfenland. I think that Elfenland, originally Elfenroads, now Elfenroads again. I'm not sure this is necessary to get, though. Like Jason said, Ticket to Ride, Airlines Europe are much more streamlined games designed by the same designer that he used this, and I did enjoy this a lot, but if I never played this again, I wouldn't be that upset. It's okay. I'll give it a 6, but it's barely a 6 for me. It's one of those, and Elfen Gold, I would give like a 3. That's how much I dislike adding that to the game. And if I did play this, I'd probably play Elfen Sea.
Yeah, I mean, I feel the same way. I have the Grail game version, but that was in whatever year. Let me see what year this was. This
It was 96? No, 92.
1992. So this was 1992.
It's an old game here.
In 1992, that was
It's almost 25 years old.
considered new, unique, fresh mechanics. But now, obviously, with Ticket to Ride and everything else, the game doesn't stand up as well as it did compared to his other games. So I'm going to give it an awesomeness rating of 5.
All right. Again, great game for its day. I just don't think it translates as well to 2016.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews, as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at DicetowerNetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.